Alright, so I'm working on 67 Chevelle again today. I think the last place I left off is I had the whole rear section in the car. I had the quarters and the tail pan and the rear window, the trunk filler panel all in place. So I pulled all those out of there so that I could pull out the wheel houses and the trunk pan and put a coat of epoxy on them and then put everything back together. One of the other things that I like to do is I actually take my wheel houses and I go ahead and spot weld those together as one assembly and then put them all in place. So everything's back in place, fit really nice. I've actually just got it sheet metal screwed in place right now because I do want to test fit my quarters one more time just to make sure that there's not any small adjustments that I need to make, but I think for the most part it's in good shape. So before I put the quarters back up on here, I want to go ahead and start working on the drip rail channels. Just make sure that I get these up here so that they're in the right place when it is time to put the quarters on here and the roof skin. So as you can see, I've got the old piece sitting right up in the location. Pretty easy to put it back in the same spot. I just simply use the spot weld holes as a point of reference, and so pretty easy to do. The other thing that you can do is if you still have the caulk up on the inside of the channel, up in this channel here, you can actually get in there with a headlamp or drop light, flashlight, whatever you like to use, and use that caulk, that remaining caulk on the old drip rail channel as a point of reference as well. So I've got this sitting in here where I want it for now. And what I've done is I've come through and I've just used some pieces of tape as a point of reference for the new piece. So I've done some measurement. The new piece has about the same flange on it here, maybe just a little bit off, 1/16 of an inch, but that's not going to be a problem. I'll be able to eyeball it when I get it welded in. I'm also going to make a mark down here. Right here in this spot here, I made a mark because the measurements here on this end of the drip rail channel are exactly the same as the new piece. And so this is where I'm going to actually start as my point of reference right here at the back side of this drip rail channel. One thing that I wanted to point out on these new drip rail channels is they're actually pretty nice. They came from AMD. They have an AMD part number, but they're not made by AMD. They're actually made by Classic. But nonetheless, it's a really nice piece, stamped exactly like the originals. There are a few just things that are off just a little bit, but nothing that's that big of a deal. There's this notch here on the pieces that I have that aren't the same in the same location as the factory notches. So definitely I'm not going to want to use that as a point of reference because it'll put me in the wrong spot. The other thing that I've noticed on these up here in the front where the drip rail molding snaps on is that this section here of the molding is shorter than this section here of the original. So just something to kind of keep in mind. I don't think it's going to be a problem. It may just result in the drip rail molding having to be pushed up a little bit more forward so that it doesn't hang over too far on the back side. The other thing that you want to do is go ahead and get this garnish piece put on the A-pillar. As you can see here, I've got the garnish piece in place. And again, that just kind of helps you as you're trying to position these and get these in the right place. So next step is I'm just going to take the old one out again, and I'm going to position the new piece. And I'm just going to attach it with sheet metal screws. I'll use a low profile head because I don't want to weld it in place yet. What I'd like to do is go ahead and get the quarters on here, get the roof skin on here, just kind of see how everything fits before I make any permanent positioning. And then from there, if everything looks good, then I'll just pull the roof skin back off and I will weld it right where it needs to be. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and just punch it. I'm just going to punch it with my punch tool. And I'm just going to punch all along here. I'll probably do a very similar spacing and number of spot welds or plug welds that the factory had. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll coat the front and the back side, or sorry, the back side of the drip rail molding and the roof brace where I'm going to weld. I'll use my weld through primer in each of those spots, and it should be pretty simple. I've got the replacement drip rail channel in place now here on the 67 Chevelle, and for the most part, no problems in terms of getting it fitted. Right now, I've just got it attached with some low-profile sheet metal screws, just to kind of keep it in place before I do the final welding. You will see here that I did have to make a couple of relief slits just to get the piece to fit the contour of this quarter window a little bit better. So it didn't fit real well when I stuck it up there, and so I just cut the relief slits in it, and I was able to just gently finesse it into place. And you can see here just by this relief here, there's just a little bit of a gap, so it didn't need much help. So I'll just come back and I'll weld those slits shut and then metal finish them, and you'll never know that I had to do that. So everything's in place on this side. Now on the driver's side, things went a lot smoother. I didn't have to make any relief cuts in the piece, and it fit up into this area real well. So no problems. Again, I've got this side attached with sheet metal screws. I've already used the original pieces just to give me an idea of where I want to put the plug welds. So once I take these channels back off, I'll punch all of them, and then I'll just plug weld them to the roof brace here. So yeah, everything's in place. They fit pretty well. Shouldn't have any problems. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting the quarters back on, and hopefully these screws don't get into my way. If they do, I'll just yank them out, and maybe I'll put a couple of real light tack welds in there to hold the piece in place. But we'll see what happens. What I really want to check is when I put the quarter in, how does that quarter panel sit up into this new channel? So I want to make sure that this is in place and in the right spot before I do any final welding. So that's just really the next step here, is get back on it and put the quarters back up on the car. Use the original drip rails basically as a template, as a point of reference to install the new drip rails. And I've learned a few things. One is that the replacement drip rails, I guess, depending on where you get them from and who makes them, aren't an exact match to the factory, which is no big surprise. I ordered these from either AMD or OPG, but they're not manufactured by AMD. They're actually a Classic headquarters brand. If you can see that, the reflection's probably bad, but for the most part, they do fit pretty good. It's just that they need a little bit of tweaking. I think earlier in the process, I had shown that on one of the drip rails, I had to cut some relief slits to get that drip rail to fit the contour of the quarter window. And then I had mentioned that the other drip rail didn't need those relief slits. Turns out they actually did. And again, I've got the skin on the car right now, so you can't see where I put those. But just something to keep in mind when you're doing this. The other thing that I realized is that even though I used the original piece to locate, to kind of help me locate the new drip rail, there wasn't an exact match, and so I've actually since had to take those screws out and reposition the drip rail. One of the things to be aware of, at least on the drip rails that I had, is this very front edge right here. It's actually 3/8 of an inch shorter than the factory. So if you use your factory drip rail moldings to position the new drip rail, the edge of this channel right here is going to be too far over, and then that's going to cause you problems when you put your molding on. That molding basically comes all the way to the edge of the seam here. So it's going to, the chrome is going to come around, or the aluminum is going to come around, and it's going to mate up right there, and it just has a nice clean finish. So what I've done is I've opted to take the sheet metal screws out, and I'm going to kind of just split the difference. So I don't have this drip rail exactly flush with the edge of the A-pillar, but that's okay because I took my moldings and actually put those on, and there's a little bit of extra space there, a little bit of extra length, so I'll be able to get those to line up The other thing that you have to do, again, as you're kind of splitting the difference, is you may have to just kind of adjust how far down the edge of that drip rail right there drops down. So the only other option that I could think of is probably welding a little extra length to the new drip rails, but that's kind of a pain in the neck. So definitely not going to do that. So one of the things that you can do, especially, you know, if you run into any problems with the positioning of the drip rail, is just keep it loose, put your quarter on, put your roof skin on, and then what you'll be able to do, even though I've got this clamped down now, I've got it in a good spot, so I don't want to remove the clamps, but what you can do then at that point is you can just slide this drip rail back and forth until you get it positioned where you want it. That's probably the best way to do it. You know, that way you don't have any problems getting it located. I put the sheet metal screws in there thinking that I might somehow get lucky and get everything to line up and sit in there nicely, and that probably wasn't the best way to do it. So what I would recommend, again, is get your roof skin on, get your quarters on, and then you can just slide that drip rail up inside of there, and then you can move it frontwards and backwards, up and down, to get yourself a nice position. And then from there, go ahead and get it clamped in place. The tricky part here now is, you know, how do you keep that drip rail in place without moving it? Because you're going to need to take the roof skin off and the quarter off to get it welded in. So just mark it somehow, you know, whether you put a line up here in the seam or you put some tape as a point of reference, but you should be able to do that. And then you can start to attach it. And then what I do is I just do one final fit. So anyway, that's what it's looking like there. Really nice fitment now in all of these areas. If you can see, the roof skin actually sits down in there real nice. And then if we look at the other side, here I've got this clamped as well. And again, it's sitting in there very nicely now after I've cut all the relief slits, just again to get myself just a nice little tweak and bend in this area of the quarter window. That was the biggest problem, is just making sure that you get those all snipped up and get it bent into shape. So I'm pretty happy with the way everything looks now. So I am going to be working on getting the drip rail attached. Again, what I typically do is I find a way to mark it so I know exactly where it needs to be. Again, you could take a marker and mark the inside here and then sit inside the car where you can see that mark. Maybe use some tape as a point of reference. And then what I do is I'll pop the roof skin up a little bit and I'll start to attach it underneath where I need it. You know, then I'll put the roof skin back on, make sure that everything fits the way that it should. Then you can pop your quarter down a little bit. Again, just kind of trial and error, making sure that you use sheet metal screws. Don't weld anything yet. And then once you're really happy with the fitment, like I am now, I'm going to pull the roof skin off and pull the quarters off, and then I'm going to be able to weld those drip rails to the roof bracing. All right, so if you're replacing your drip rail channels with reproduction pieces like I am here, and you find that you're having a little bit of trouble getting this curvature of the quarter window area flush with your quarter and your roof skin, one of the things that you can do is just go ahead and pull that quarter panel off. I've got mine sitting here on the floor, but pull it off, take a look and see how your fitment is up here on this horizontal plane of the roof. If that looks good, then come back into this area and you can do a little bit of work. A lot of times, right in this curvature here, it doesn't quite match up the way that you'd like. So mine looks pretty good here for the roof skin, but when I had the quarter panel up here, it was off by about 1/8 of an inch, and I just didn't really like the way that it was seating in there. So one of the things that you can do is, again, you're going to have this part of your drip rail channel attached with sheet metal screws up underneath the roof skin here. And as you can see here, I had a screw here, and I had a screw right here. And so what I've done is I've taken those out, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a clamp. I'm just going to use a clamp here to get that roof skin flush. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull this drip channel up against that roof skin nice and flush here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically take a sheet metal screw and I'm going to attach it in here somewhere, just to make sure that I've got this contour of the drip rail set the way that I want, and I'm going to just screw it there. That's going to hold this section in place. The other thing that I'm going to do then is I know that the lower half of this drip rail matched up well with the quarter panel. So then what I'm going to do once I get this side here screwed and attached is I'm going to come in here and finesse this and basically pull it like this to get it to line up with the hole that I already had drilled. So if you see there, I'm going to attach it there. And that should do it. And as you can see, if I get this hole lined up here and then I come up and look at the other hole that I had right here, you can see that they're still pretty lined up. So we'll see how things go here, but that's one of the things that you can do is just kind of keep working your way up and down that drip rail channel using sheet metal screws to hold it in place, and then massage and mold the rest of the drip rail the way that you need it. Just finished putting this quarter on just to check my drip rail fitment. So everything looks good here. I think we're going to call it good. As you can see here, the quarter panel is sitting down into the drip rail channel the way that it should, and so is the roof skin. So just by taking off the quarter and adjusting that short distance of the drip rail flange and getting it positioned with sheet metal screws, I was able to get the flanges on the skin and the quarter to sit down inside the channel. So pretty happy with the way things turned out here on the driver's side. Next thing to do is I'll just take all of these panels off, and then I'll get up behind there and plug weld the channels in place, and we should be good to go. Here's what the passenger side looks like. It fit well. Also, I did have one little spot down in here that didn't fit quite as well as I'd hoped it would, but it's going to be fine. I'm going to be able to get in there and spot weld the skin and the quarter down into the channel. So everything looks good, but yeah, just be patient and just keep kind of going through this trial and error thing with these reproduction drip rails. They will eventually fit in the way that they're supposed to, but again, just gonna have to be patient with them and work them over. And then of course, once we get the skin and the quarter spot welded in place down into that channel, when we get to the bodywork phase, we'll get everything cleaned up inside of there and use a self-leveling seam sealer to finish everything off. All right, well, I finally finished up installing these replacement drip rails on the 67 Chevelle, and I have to admit I'm pretty happy with the way that they turned out, considering as much trouble as I'd had with these. I'd been fighting them for a couple of evenings, getting them to fit right. My biggest concern and the biggest issue that I ran into is that they came up just a little bit short in terms of the length when you get up here to the A-pillar where the molding would go on, and it's supposed to basically come up here and then be flush with the windshield molding. They were about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch too short. So anyway, I did a little bit of work on them. I moved them back to where they should have been based on some of the stampings, and just came to the realization that I was going to have to do some fabrication on them. So again, pretty happy with the way they turned out. You can see here that the drip rail comes down here along the quarter, real nice, and then everything fits as it should without any pressure or tweaking of the roof skin or the quarter. So they set down in there without any problem, and that's what you want when you put these roof skins on. They should literally just sit right down with no binding, no tweaking necessary to get them to go into place. So as you can see here now, the edge of the drip rail is just a hair short of where the windshield molding is going to be, but that's okay because the actual molding that's going to go on is a little oversized, so I'll be able to snap it on and then just push it up to where I need it to be. So what I did here, though, in case you're wondering, is I took the old drip rail and I just cut a little section off of it, just right off the tip of it. I started off cutting about 5/8 of an inch off, and then just cleaned it up and cut it down as I needed to go on to the new drip rail there. So I just came in here before this piece was welded on. I just came in on the new drip rail and squared it off. I just cut it real quick with my cutoff tool and got it squared up. And then the piece that I cut off of the donor drip rail, I just continued to keep it squared up and trim it until I got it about where I wanted. So welded it in there. And I might do just a little bit of body work there. It's not really necessary because it is going to get covered with the new drip rail molding. And then if we go over to the other side here, you can see here as well that I've got this set up real nice. Again, this one I didn't get quite as close to the edge as the other side, but again, I'm going to be able to take that new molding and push it on and then move it over so that it's flush up in here. So for a little bit of a day's work, it turned out pretty good. This drip rail also fits real good in here. Again, no problems. Set right down inside of there. I didn't have to force it. I didn't have to do any type of serious clamping down in this area. So the next thing that I'll do is I've just got those drip rails attached with sheet metal screws underneath there. So once I'm pretty happy with the fitment of the panels here, I'm going to pop everything off and then I'm going to weld the drip rail to the roof bracing.